This is Dr. Charles Parker, and you're listening to Core Brain Journal. It's a place where I connect both fresh discoveries and interesting different perspectives from advanced mind science with the realities of real people and everyday life down on Main Street. So welcome, folks, one more time to Core Brain Journal. This is Dr. Charles Parker, and this is episode 052 at Core Brain Journal, and we have a lovely, thoughtful, really interesting and meaningful on a lot of different levels guest, Kay Bransford. Thanks for joining us, Kay. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for having me.
So Kay, folks, is going to talk to us really about legacy, but it's really more than legacy. It's kind of legacy mixed with self-realization and helping others to really inform us about their lives and making the transitions really as they wind down. So Kay is a positive aging lifestyle advocate and a best-selling author of Memory Bank, Your Workbook for Organizing Life. Now, that's really interesting, Kay, because, you know, I was thinking about Memory Bank from the point of view of life ending, but perhaps tell us more about it, because it sounds like it might be more for your entire life, not just legacy and end of life.
Yes, and that is interesting. When I started on this journey, it was because I was a caregiver for two parents, and I needed a lot of information to be able to help them. They had done all the estate planning, all the financial, all the insurance planning, and then when things started to happen and they needed me to step in and help, I needed more of a practical guide to how do I pay bills, what was their medical history, how do I manage the household, do they have warranties? It was really the practical side of caring for them, and what surprised me was in the first year of business, I launched my business plan all around being a caregiver. Most of my clients were couples who divide and conquer and really wanted to use this tool to help organize their households and their families.
So it's more than just end of life circumstance, because folks, just to let you know, Kay sent me a little bio and kind of her history, which we're going to get into in a minute. And I got that transformational moment, and I think I focused a bit too much on it because it sounds like it's a much broader topic. So Kay, are you a coach now? Well, you said something about that. What do you actually do professionally?
So what I do professionally is I do a ton of talks. I teach a lot of classes really for caregivers to help them understand what do they really need to help feel more control as they're walking on this journey to be a caregiver. Most of the caregiving groups focus on almost your psycho-emotional needs, and I focus more on the practical matters of which papers do you need, what information are you going to need to show up with, what legal documents need to be in place. So I focus on those tools that really help people do the job, not as much around the psycho-emotional aspects of being a caregiver.
Okay, it sounds like you've got a really good prefrontal cortex, girl.
Thank you.
You've got that executive function cooking. This is a good thing. So tell us more about that book. What are some of the things you would say in introducing people to the concept of why they would need it and how would they need it? Let me back up for a second. I just wanted to make sure we did get into the thing that we were talking about just before we recorded, and that was your experience with your parents that really drove you to think, I've got to communicate about this much more effectively. So what was happening in your life back then?
So I was living near my parents. I'm the youngest of four kids, and I used to have dinners with them a lot. I'm raising two kids, had a really great life and great relationship with them. And then my parents started to have health issues. My mom had a stroke. My dad started to be more forgetful. And we really noticed that they were cognitively having these issues. And my dad was a career military veteran. They were great planners. They always talked about what they wanted to do with the rest of their life. They'd done all the planning and everything was in place. But as things started to fall apart, the hard thing was knowing, we noticed the water was getting turned off. Okay, how do we pay that bill? I would go to the doctor with them, and you probably are familiar with this, but the appointments are short, and they're like, tell me what's wrong and tell me what your medical history is, and you need to spit that out in seconds. So I really noticed I didn't have all the practical information I needed to really be helpful to my parents as they were kind of starting to have these health issues.
And I think the thing that was most interesting for me personally was the relative denial that they had about their deterioration. Could you amplify on that, please?
Oh, yeah. So, it was to the point where my parents were driving. There was more dents on the car. They were getting lost coming over to my house. They would tell us stories about the dinner they had last night, and we were with them, and it was a totally different story of what actually happened. So we realized that they weren't functioning really well, and they were just operating like everything was normal, but they never recognized it in themselves. So my siblings came into town. They had lived 2 in California, 1 in Colorado, and we had family meetings, and we said, hey, Mom and Dad, we're noticing these failings. We're really getting concerned for you. And my parents were like, thanks for the information. We don't agree. We have no idea where you're coming from. We did this over the course of 2 years. They just didn't recognize that they weren't really functioning between the 2 of them. They both had cognitive issues, and so while they thought the other one had some memory issues, they didn't recognize that they both had those failings.
It's a symbol of a good marriage. I'm covering you, you cover me. So, yeah. And what did you do? How did you ultimately resolve that conflict, that difficulty?
So, and what I tell a lot of people is it really, sometimes you just have to wait for that critical incident to happen. So while I spent probably a year trying to buttress and back up and cover up for them, I realized that I was going to have to let them fail. When Mom called me and said, Dad's on the floor, I don't know what to do, I started to say, call 911 and let the emergency people come, and then I would meet them at the hospital. So other people were seeing how much my parents were failing. And once those things started to happen, it really came down to one doctor that my parents showed up in 2 different emergency rooms over 2 different days, and it happened to be the same doctor. And thankfully, the second time she met with them, she was like, we have a problem, called the social worker, and she actually put into place the process to get their driver's license suspended because they shouldn't have been driving. So that was really the first critical incident and that we faced. Then when they continued to drive without a driver's license, we realized we had to figure out how do we take the car keys away. And we couldn't just take the car keys away because they weren't going to turn them over. We needed to hide the cars. So we just had so many, it was almost problem after problem that we were facing. So I think part of it is I tell people is really, you may have to wait for that critical incident to happen before you can really to step in and help them.
So, folks, listen to this. Kay has been kind enough to give us a PDF. It's going to be there on the show notes at corebrainjournal.com/052 download. And in that PDF, she's going to be telling us about that transformational experience. And I haven't read it, of course. I haven't seen it yet, but the issue is, it sounds like it's going in the direction that you're taking us right now into what do we actually do? What's the structure that we apply when these things happen? Is that so?
Yes, it does cover some of those things, and a lot of the care tools really go into, kind of what are the practical details you need to start thinking about collecting, because when things start to fall apart and fail, you need a power of attorney in place. You need to have some estate planning documents and powers to be able to legally represent this person, both financially and medically. And do you have those tools? Do you know how to pay the bills? Do you know where the money is? Do you know cash flow? So it talks through that. But I think the biggest transformation that every individual needs to make is that you can't just step in and this isn't, I hear this term and it really offends me a bit, is people say when you become mom's mom or you become dad's dad, you're not really flip-flopping roles. You really need to think about stepping in and being a care partner. And how do you do that with humanity and dignity and let them feel meaning and purpose as they're progressing in their whatever their healthcare issues might be. Humans still have that need for meaning and purpose. So how do you help them manage through this process while they're having health issues?
That sounds so very interesting and again, so well organized. take us to that next step, however. I'm curious about that transformational experience with evolving your communication and actually setting some structure into your relationship with your parents. How does that translate into life planning in general? I mean, that's a big question, but it just did occur to me. How do you take those lessons and run them back against the tape a little bit?
Yeah, that is a great question, because I think that is the biggest epiphany that I had on this journey was really, I came in it, I used to lead large business units in the workplace, and so it was very easy to be a leader when there's a structured environment. But when you walk into it and you're helping someone that you love and you have that family history, you can't just take over and manage it for them. You really need to change how you approach the problem. And so a lot of it was really changing our mindset about how do we have these discussions with someone? How do we move through this process? How do you empathize with the person and say, I understand that you are frustrated that you can't drive your car anymore, not just, no, Mom, you can't drive the car anymore because you had that accident. So I think it's really changing how you have the discussion and looking at the person you're helping as a friend, even if it might be a parent. That was the big change for me.
Well, and it sounds like just those healthy ways of balanced communication that you're talking about can work downline with your own children. So yes, you're going upline a little bit from an age perspective, but just that position of let's partner on the resolution of this problem in some constructive way sounds like it has broader application.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's funny because I recognize my own relationship with my daughter and how sometimes you just want to fix it for them, and you can't just step in and fix it for someone. You actually need to, she needs to walk through it and feel the maturity of solving her own problems. So I have been able to apply that back to being a better mom.
So the workbook, it sounds very interesting. So Memory Bank, what it does, you tell me, is a concern wherever you are in your life, a concern whether it's a child talking about parents, even parents thinking about maybe a child going off to school, I don't know. How do they structure where they're going next and have a protocol for it?
Right. Well, a lot of it is really how do you, I guess it's stepping back almost and thinking about all the personal information that surrounds your life. How are you managing all of it? So I know us as we are digital immigrants because we're new to this technology platform, and my kids are digital natives. So we look at the way we manage information, and I know it's very different. My kids will put everything on their cell phone, but we wouldn't do that where we are today. We have stuff in a file cabinet. We might be using a bank box. So, under a keyboard, even with your passcodes, we have our information all over the place. So a lot of the things that I really talk to are how do you organize all the personal information that surrounds your life and make sure it's in one place. So if you can't get to it, if your spouse needed to step in for you, or your sister needed to step in and help, or even a best friend, they would know how to help you, and they would know what your personal wishes are and how you want them to act on for you and advocate for you.
Okay, I can't help but think that every single person listening to this, wherever they are, in their car, where they're working out in the gym, this is something every single person needs at really every level. I mean, because even an adolescent, a young adult going off to college could really profit from having this material all pulled together effectively.
Yes, and you're making me laugh because my son left for college last year. He turned 18, and I said, congratulations, Cole, for your birthday. I got you, a durable power of attorney and medical directives. Our appointment with the lawyer is on, Wednesday, and he just cracked up because he knew, I tell everyone, every adult over the age of 18 should really name someone who is their financial advocate and name someone who's going to be their medical advocate. And most parents don't even think about that when their kids go off to school. And this, from your background, but if he was in the hospital just with strep throat, or we broke his leg, the doctors couldn't talk to me without a power of attorney just to tell me how he was doing. So having those tools in place really applies to everyone over the age of 18.
Well, with HIPAA requirements being what they are, and just over in the mental health field, I mean, I don't practice medicine in the other medical aspects, but just with HIPAA alone, with psychiatry, we see so many unclear boundaries that, and we have laws that say you can't do this and you can't do that, and yet we know very well that we should be able to do it, but there are impediments because somebody hasn't agreed to something on the front end. And what you're saying is, gang, let's get together and agree on this communication process effectively before reality hits the rotating blades.
Yeah. And I think that's the big thing, is really, how do we start changing everyone's mindset about how do you set up a safety net or a backup system for yourself as a functioning adult, and have the legal tools in place to do it, because we are a litigious society and we need those documents in place just to be able to keep our freedoms and make sure that someone can represent us if we're not standing there in place.
That's super excellent advice. I mean, I think what happens is we're all, I'm speaking for myself obviously, but we're all so busy living our lives, we forget about that part of the exposure. We think about, hey, just like your parents, hey, we can handle reality, it's not a problem. And then what happens when it does actually happen, we don't have the proper preparation for it, and this sounds like an excellent way to just get organized, for want of a better expression.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that goes to the way that people kind of have always talked about estate planning. Everyone thinks about estate planning as planning for death. What happens after you die, when we know that the Department of Health and Human Services has said 7 out of 10 of us, when we turn 65, are going to need 3 or more years of long-term care before the end of our life. All of us think we're just going to die in our sleep, or it's going to be a quick moment, but we actually are 70% of us are going to need someone to be able to be our personal advocate for at least 3 years. Those are the numbers. So recognizing that reality is what I think is so important for every adult, is you need to start putting those systems in place and thinking about it and talking about the reality of that situation.
Those are horrifying numbers, since I am over 65, girl.
Sorry about that.
Stop facing reality, No, that's so good. Now, let me ask you this, because for our listeners and for myself included, is your workbook an actual paper workbook that you could put it all in one place, or is it digital, or how does it actually, let's get to the reality of how that actually works so a person can use it effectively.
Yep. So there's actually 3 different varieties of it. There's a workbook, so it's a book that you can get on Amazon.com or on the website. Any bookstore will have it. So it is basically a workbook, just like a math workbook or any other kind of workbook, that's going to prompt you through recording your personal, financial, medical, online, all your passcodes, your security questions. It's going to take you through the process of getting all of your information organized in one place. The workbook doesn't really grow and live with a human, so there's a binder system for people that know that their information is constantly changing and they want to be able to tailor it to their own needs. And then there's also a PDF version that comes on a flash drive, so those people that are paperless have a system that they can take with them wherever they travel.
So you could just take it out to your kids wherever. You could get a couple flash drives and take it out to whoever in different parts of the country, and then they've got it on record.
Yes, and my mother-in-law and father-in-law travel a lot, so they take it with them when they go to Hawaii for 3 months. They're taking it with them because they need that information wherever they are.
Very interesting. So the next part of it is you could design an amulet so they could wear it as a necklace.
That might be the next thing.
So then, what are the problems that you had and experienced along the way with this, Kay? What would you say would be some of the impediments that kind of set you surprisingly back, and how did you overcome them?
So that's really the beginning of the launch of the business. Was the problems were, so I had that durable power of attorney, and what happened was I had financial institutions refuse to accept it. So they said we don't accept, this is a big issue for kids walking into any financial institution with a durable power of attorney. Their first response is typically no. So Fidelity, for instance, said we don't accept powers of attorney more than 2 years old. USAA said we don't accept them over 5 years old. That totally goes against the idea of durable power of attorney. But there's just such, this elder fraud has been so rampant that they're very hesitant to it. So that was really why I ended up launching Memory Bank, is my dad's like, hey, let's sit down with me and we can set it up online. So we actually created end arounds so I could go in and manage their Fidelity account, so I could pay bills. I did a lot of things for them digitally. So that was the biggest impediment that surprised me so much, is we all think, I just said in the beginning of this conversation, get that durable power of attorney. You are going to need it in many cases, and many places will readily accept it, but you're also going to find that it doesn't always work, which is really frustrating, and why someone that's going to step in needs more information than just having that legal document in hand.
That is very interesting. I know how difficult it is with our investments to even get my wife to be able to talk to people about what's in my name. How the paperwork is sometimes ridiculous. I can imagine what it would be if we both had difficulties of any kind, because then we have a serious confusion going on. So and I'm sure if it's that way for me, it's that way for others.
Yeah, and that is a great point, because I think a lot of spouses think, because we're married, I don't need a durable power of attorney for my spouse. But especially when your spouse has an account only in their name, if you are not named as their power of attorney and something should happen, there's not like a marital right that just gives them access to your account. So there needs to be those powers in place, or you can set a power of attorney up directly with the financial institution even. You don't have to just go to a lawyer to get this overarching document.
Now say a little more about that part right there. That's interesting. But you're in a language base that I'm not familiar with. Tell me how that happens. What actually happens with that?
So first I'll preface this with, I'm not a lawyer. I've only had to deal with all of these issues myself, and have talked to a lot of lawyers. But what really happens is, let's say you have an account with a bank, and the bank will ask you, I walk in with a durable power of attorney, and the first thing they're going to say is, we won't accept your durable power of attorney. We want the durable power of attorney on our letterhead. And basically what they're really saying is, we don't want to have our lawyers have to review your 15-page power of attorney. We just want you to sign over and use our power of attorney that's on our bank's letterhead and uses the language we want to convey and the permissions we want to grant, and it protects the bank. But if I sign that power of attorney with the bank, I'm actually giving someone access to that account immediately. So, but in your durable power of attorney, if you go work with an estate lawyer, that is typically a power of attorney that goes into effect under certain conditions. It might be a springing power of attorney if there's a medical issue that comes about, but it can have different powers around the durable power of attorney, and that's what you work with an estate lawyer or an elder care attorney with. And that's why they're very valuable, and I recommend you do that. But you could also, if you just had a simple account and you wanted to have your spouse put on it, you could actually have her go into the bank and just sign their power of attorney to have immediate access to get into your account if she needs it.
So that's interesting. Thank you for saying that, because that's one way of solving it. But I know my wife is exceedingly sensitive to giving people permission to jump into something. So, and what you said, what I heard you say, I thought I heard you say, is that with that, the bank then has access in ways that you may not have intended.
Well, it's not as much the bank as that the bank controls when those powers go into effect. And basically the power of attorney they do is so simple that the date if you sign the power of attorney and said, I'm giving these powers to my wife who's not named on the account and I'm not adding her to it, but she would immediately be able to get access to your bank account. So you're giving up that permission immediately and with no conditions. If you do a durable power of attorney, you might say, I don't want my wife to have access to this account unless I'm in the hospital and the doctor says I can no longer manage my financial affairs.
I see. Well, that is complicated. I mean, this is the reason to read the book, because you're walking through some serious impediments there that are confusing, really.
It is. It's very confusing, and the time you don't want to learn all this is when you have a loved one that has a health issue and you need to step in and help them. That's the last time. That's the wrong time to have to learn all of it.
That is such good information. It's so helpful, and it's very provocative. I mean, you approach it in such a utilitarian way. I mean, it's like, this really must be done. This isn't something to put off to the last minute, because just as you said a moment ago, that's the wrong time to do it. And I think the point is that a lot of people are in denial because they don't want to face the fact they're going to die. I mean, the issue is, I don't want to talk about death, because if I talk about it, it might happen.
Yeah, and that's why I wish we could rewind how the lawyers talked about it, because it really isn't about death. It's how do you want to live the life, the rest of your life, because it's going to impact when you're living.
Well, that is so very helpful. So tell us again, Kay, as we wind up here. I mean, that time flew by. I just happened to look at the time, and such an interesting conversation. I really appreciate it, and I know our listeners will too. Thank you so much for taking the time. So where would you, Kay Bransford, like to send people to connect with your information?
So if they want to get in touch with me, the easiest way is going to be to go to the website, memorybank.com. That's a great way to get in touch with me. And there's a contact us, so feel free to reach out and ask me a question.
Well, that sounds great. And we're going to have the link to your book. We'll have the links right there on the website, on the show notes. And I think another thing is really exceedingly provocative are the numbers you have. It rolled my socks up and down. Whatever, 70% of people are going to have 3 years in the bed kind of thing. Is that the way was it 70%?
So, yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like what I said is you'll have 3 or more years where you're going to need long-term care services. So that might just be someone needs to bring you groceries. You might not be able to drive. You might need a ride somewhere. It doesn't mean you're going to be in the bed and not functioning, or even we can't communicate. Mm-hmm. You could be highly functional.
I got you. But that's still 70%. I mean, you're saying, look, guys, get ready. This is what happens.
Yep. Figure out what you want now, because you don't want to have the conversation when you're in the bed.
Kay Bransford, thank you so much for really great, practical, utilitarian information. It's just really good. And I know a number of our group are going to be, our listeners are going to really be happy to have had the occasion to listen to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Core Brain Journal. We're working every day behind the scenes to bring you reports that connect research benches with those street trenches. Here we share the complexity of mind science because, as you know, details really do matter. One of the most pervasive, misunderstood challenges is how commonplace medications, like those written for ADHD, are used so regularly without clear guidelines. If you think you'd like more specifics, take a minute to download my 2-page PDF packed with video links and references on the absolute essentials of how to start ADHD medications. They're easily available at corebrainjournal.com/start. Thanks for listening. Do connect and stay tuned. Together we can make a difference.